This week on Feeling My Oats, we talk about body image and body positivity. First, we talk about the movement of body positivity. We then talk about our own relationship with our bodies. And finally, we explore the relationship between bodies, race, gender, and sexuality. We hope you enjoy, faggots.
Welcome back to
Feeling My Oats.
This is, of course, our weekly chat show where we kiki about our lives, catch up with politics, and have a fun, flirtatious, faggy good time.
Yay, faggy.
We're your hosts, Jeff Dunaway.
And Jojo.
And welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. But before we begin our episode on body image and body positivity, we want to encourage you all to engage with us on Instagram at Feeling My Oats Pod, Twitter at Feeling My Oats PD, and our YouTube channel, Feeling My Oats.
Do you have a YouTube channel? I have to do that.
Every single time.
Yes.
If you're feeling even more eager for our attention, send us an email at feelingmyoatspod@gmail.com with your deepest, shadiest questions and stories. We hope to bring them into the pod. And finally, follow our Patreon.
Ding.
Yay! Just search for Feeling My Oats, okay? You can check us out for some exclusive content you can only find there. We also have exclusive sound bites, so you might want to check that out. And we are recording our first Patreon exclusive episode on the topic of embarrassment, where we share our juicy, embarrassing sex-related stories and talk about the ways we cope with moments of embarrassment. Mm-hmm. So that should be super sexy and fun and flirty, and we hope to see y'all there.
Work.
Mm-hmm. So Jeff, how are your oats this week?
They're fine.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. I'm trying to do less small talk in life. Just like having fatigue from serving people. I mean, I love to serve people, but
that's
like
real. That's real.
Yeah. Because we all know what's happening. We don't need to constantly small talk, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shit's in shambles right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't have the fucking luxury to talk about the weather, but I guess we're just gonna happen. Like,
well, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay.
How's the weather?
It's great.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
I can see it from my
backyard. Oh, I'm too poor to have a backyard. Honestly, I think this week is pretty good. I start reading more than writing.
Okay. So you're reading the children.
I'm reading you, specifically. I'm reading Mutual Aid by Dean Spade, which is pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And I regret not reading it earlier in my life, just to have a broader sense of what community work looks like and feels like. And if I have read it a little bit early, I feel like I could have, leveraged a little bit more of my being into a community, I guess. I think we're all trying to tackle with the question of ourselves recently.
Yeah,
in terms
self
of what
versus community.
Exactly. And especially in Canada, everything seems quote unquote fine. In reality, it's not fine. I mean, like it's always like an overarching question of like, how do we live, basically?
Yeah, that's an important question.
Yeah, I think it's a lifelong struggle. It's a lifelong question that we all... I mean, people who don't think about them, you have to really question your privilege in life,
Exactly. I mean, it's very that.
Yeah.
And whatever is happening is impacting people of color and communities of color at such a higher rate. Yeah. It's a lot more devastating for those communities. So.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I kept thinking about how migration is traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that, like, I feel like I kept a lot of my experience under the table.
Mm-hmm. Because you don't want to disrupt,
the normalcy.
Yeah. Which is what?
Yeah. It's tough, but I think I'm pretty privileged that I'm young, I'm able-bodied, and
ideally, you are young, dumb, and full of cum.
Mm-hmm. Especially the last part.
Yeah. I've witnessed.
Yeah. Sadly. I want to give a quick shout out to a writer that I really admire recently. Her name is Kathy Park Hong. One of the tweets that she tweeted writes something like, "Seeing Poland and Romania welcome Ukrainians should have should have us seriously reflect on our refugee policy and how we need to be more generous with those fleeing from wars that we directly and indirectly created.
Yeah, and by we mean the West.
The West and like the empire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because borders are ultimately very arbitrary and...
Yeah, they're imaginary, they're imperialist, they simply do not exist.
But they needed to exist in order for war. Like that's exactly what's happening in Ukraine, because it's a border that they're trying to like.
Yeah, it's imperialist propaganda for sure.
That's just the gist of it.
And the amount of times where like the empires create borders for other nations and for other people across the world, especially in Asia. A lot of the borders that have manifested over the last like century have been created by
the colonial powers.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Like I think me as a migrant here probably is an exceptional case. Like people often weaponize till this day like the trope of Asian being the good citizen.
Oh yeah.
And like in a lot of ways it's not true, first of all. Second of all, it's just not a fair evaluation of what the immigration
process is like. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot like the wealth disparity between Asian migrants are actually the highest out of all migrants of color. So I think that's
it's a lot more nuanced than what is thrown out there in the media.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like I noticed that you also wanted to bring up a tweet as well regarding migration.
Yes, I did actually. Just recently, I wanted to bring up this tweet by Mohammed El-Kurd, who is Palestinian and kind of explores like similar topics as you. The tweet reads, "Last night, Zionist occupiers in Palestine protested against the Russian occupation of Ukraine. No comment. Today, they protested in support of the occupation soldier who shot and killed Ayad al-Halak, a 32-year-old autistic Palestinian man. No comment." And so this tweet actually just made me question how much whiteness influences our perspective of what constitutes war, sovereignty, and who is considered worth saving and from whom, right? So it's a question of whose lives are deemed more valuable than others.
Right.
And that's what is inherently part of the problem here.
Right.
Is that these wars have been happening in Palestine for a century almost. And now that it's happening in the Ukraine, everyone's just rushing to support them. Right?
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's even about like what people are calling oppression Olympics.
Yeah.
It's I think it's more it's more dangerous to have those comparisons.
Exactly.
But I think the reality is we have to understand how Ukraine as a neighboring country as NATO, like in Europe and like geologically speaking, it just makes it more appealing to media and how it can.
Well, they're also white people being targeted.
Right.
So again, just to reiterate how whiteness is a signifier for who deserves to be saved from those threats of violence and those threats of domination and those threats of colonialism.
Yeah.
Right?
There are even news coming out saying that Black people who are living in Ukraine are not getting any kind of help and getting rejected from help in Ukraine.
Exactly.
So I think that sparks up a huge like conversation about how even race exists and
within those spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
Even within European spaces.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the left side, like I think the liberal side, the discussions that are happening online are biting itself.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we're actually not really liberal. Like finding ways to,
because the argument is racism bad.
Yeah, empire bad. The Russians are bad people.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
But it also has bigger consequences for people of color more generally across the world, right?
Right.
And it also enhances our understanding of settler colonial occupation and settler colonialism just in general.
Yeah.
And it creates this narrative that those people are not worth saving or not worthy at all.
Yeah. On a lighter note, how about you? How are you feeling your oats this week? Anything new with you?
Yeah, I realize how depressing the world is lately, so I just want to spread some love and positive energy around. And for those listening, I hope you all know how much you are loved and cared for, okay? I've been going through the ringer lately. I've been going through some bouts of depression, especially last weekend. And I just want to return all the kindness and patience I received over the last week. And I just want to return it back, okay? I may not know all of you, but I hope you know how beautiful and amazing you are.
Is this a cry for help?
No.
I just want to go ahead and say that I love you.
I love you too.
And we took a much needed break last week, I think.
Yeah.
Because,
Definitely.
we're both starting something new, and also I think taking breaks is so undervalued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done 6 episodes in a row, and
Yeah.
we are like working and we're doing what we need to do to survive in this economic/political system that just does not give a fuck about us.
I think people do give a fuck about us.
I just said
It's just-
political and economic.
Right.
They don't give a fuck about you. None of them.
I mean, yeah.
But in
You're
terms of my oats, I'm trying to find ways to feel them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been super overwhelmed and keeping away from social media for the most part. That's probably why you haven't seen very many updates on our socials in general.
Good.
Yeah, right? And I've been playing games and cuddling with my
my
cats.
cat.
The simplest things are so important.
Hey,
So-
Jilly.
Hi. Those have been my oats this past week and a half. But
Work.
so much of this is just finding patience and kindness within myself. And it's a process, and I need to be mindful that I have my limits. And just to reiterate, self-love is so important in a time like this.
Yeah.
Right.
We want to give, I think this is a perfect opportunity to shout out some of the people who have been supporting the show.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any shout out you want to give? I want to give a first shout out to
Go ahead.
Kelsey. I want to give a shout out to Emily, my roommate. And I want to give a shout out to actually some of the customers that come to the shop and say that they've been listening. And it's actually super invasive, but super warming. In a way that I think, are we doing a community show? I think that's ultimately, it is exactly what the show is about. Just like reaching out, just like, hey, just saying hi, I guess. Yeah. Do you have any people that you want to give a special shout out?
Yeah, I want to give a special shout out to Thao.
Oh, hey.
Hey, girl.
Hey.
Forget about it.
She is working it. I think she's back in Hamilton, but if you're listening to this, like, shout out to me, Tao.
Yeah, shout out. Thank you for reaching out to me. And
Yeah.
when I was down on the weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
she
sweet.
sent me a huge paragraph.
Oh, I'll read about it later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna send my whole pics.
No, leave her alone. She doesn't deserve that.
I think that's wraps up our catching up this week, right?
It sure does.
But speaking of self-love, I think we can also extend to the conversation that we're gonna have today, which is about body positivity.
Yeah, come on, bawdies.
Why are we talking about body positivity? I think there are like a few apparent reasons to me, at least, because I think ultimately what kind of person we want to be starts with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
being comfortable with our bodies, because I mean, this is the vessel that we live in.
it's a meat prison. It's a flesh prison.
It's me. You thinking about me, huh?
And I'm sentenced for life.
Mm-hmm.
Hunty. I think everything starts with the self, and how our understanding of ourselves kind of inform how we relate to one another.
Yeah.
And how we understand the world, maybe. Mm-hmm. Because, like we were saying earlier, like how big the world is.
Yes.
Not a size joke, but but like how, we need to return to our body as a way to ground those feelings of anxiety or joy, and to
ground our reality.
Yeah, that's so important. We can feel so lost these days so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so this section and our conversation kind of hope to map out some of the key ideas about body positivity and also some of the caveats of body positivity that kind of manifest in our current social political consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to jump off with some definitions?
I want to jump off a bridge.
Great. I think
Yeah. Positivity.
This is dark. This is the darkest episode for me.
But yeah, before we actually jump into any further, we want to define what we mean by body positivity, okay? Body positivity is a social movement focused on the acceptance of all bodies, regardless of size, shape, skin tone, gender, and physical abilities, while challenging present-day beauty standards as an undesirable social construct, right?
And a lot of it goes hand in hand with, goes in tension with what people call body dysmorphia.
Oh,
which
definitely.
I think we also should provide some kind of definition to it.
Yeah, body dysmorphic disorder is a mental health disorder in which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance, a flaw that appears minor or can't be seen by others. But you may feel so embarrassed, ashamed, and anxious that you may avoid many social situations.
Right.
And that's true. I want to talk about that a little more.
Yeah.
And I want to get vulnerable on this pod because I do experience dysmorphia. It's quite apparent, actually. When I go into public spaces and I see myself in a mirror or see myself in a photograph, makes me feel very uncomfortable because I don't see myself like that. And I make quick judgments about myself, which is harmful, right? But I have this image of myself and what I look like that does not match with the image that I see in most cases. So it is a form of dysmorphia, and I think it also impacts me in terms of my own gender identity because I don't see myself as this rugged, masculine entity, but I am in many ways. But also my personality and my demeanor is completely different from my exterior.
Right.
So it's just a lot of these intense emotions that conflict with what I believe I look like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's like self-image and what you perceive as.
Yeah.
What you think of yourself versus what you actually are being perceived as, right?
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's this experience that just throws me over the edge sometimes, and I'm just like, I don't want to look at myself.
Right.
I don't want to look at myself. I don't want to acknowledge myself.
Has it always been kind of similar growing up, or are there like moments that you first notice about this?
Yes, when I was younger, actually, you could not tell me I was not a girl. You could not. My imagination at that age was quite phenomenal, actually. My mother had a pink scarf that I would tie around my head.
Yeah.
And I would pretend it's hair. I would wear her clothes all the time.
Do you lip sync for your life?
Yes. And
Fiercely.
I died. And I lost and died.
I remember you sharing that story about like your brother and mom watching you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about the story in tangent, but it's interesting how the topic of dysmorphia and this kind of connects, because ultimately I think the phenomenon of body positivity kind of like describing those dysmorphic feelings about our race, about our skin tone, about our size, and about our ableness of it all.
And our gender. I mean,
totally.
A lot of the time, this is a trans issue specifically too. Your perception of who you are does not match your genitalia or your body altogether, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue that we'll touch later. But going back to this conversation on dysmorphia, I envision myself as someone who is small and petite, but I'm not.
Have you always been like how would you regard yourself when you were growing up? Like, would you call yourself like a fat child or like a...
I was...
chubby, like, I don't know how
I was chubby, but I was not overweight.
Okay.
But I am now, and I mean, that's it.
The lines are blurry.
That's
though.
it.
That's it.
But yeah, the lines are blurry, and
I think that's exactly what the issue is, because when when our childhood is very dysmorphic, we don't remember much of it.
Yeah.
I think that's the core.
You just remember the traumatic
feeling.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
And you're
is weird.
fixated on those, and you hold those near
Yeah.
you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true when they say, like, the trauma from your childhood will fucking follow you until you die.
And we're being repeatedly told, like, how are you gonna make that funny though? That's the way to cope. Are you fucking serious? I mean, that's one way to cope, but like,
It's not helpful, though.
yeah.
Because these things just remanifest all the time, and if you're constantly making a joke about it, you're not actually dealing with it, right?
Yeah.
You're setting it aside again and again and again.
For quick chuckles.
Yeah, but I mean that
That
is
also
my
helps.
that is my coping mechanism. So
Yeah.
I like to make jokes and
Yeah.
make people laugh and make people feel uncomfortable, and that makes me feel comfortable.
Work. I do want to share something about my relationship with my body because I'm also inspired by what you shared earlier. I think it's really an ebb and flow, Abby and flow.
Abby,
Who the fuck is Abby? It comes and goes. There are years in my life that I feel like I've coming to learn my queerness.
yeah,
And part of the learning is to also understand my body as like I'm okay. I'm just okay by myself. Like I need to understand the limits of my body and like what actually makes me happy.
yeah,
And finding alternative ways to find some kind of happiness that is outside of the normalcy, what is traditionally and conventionally considered as beautiful.
yeah,
Just like a quick side note, like, because I, like, from a colonial city, you just grew up admiring whiteness and seeing white masculine bodies as the top of the hierarchy
of beauty,
of beauty, which is so arbitrary and meaningless. We'll talk about this later in the episode, but part of my learning of queerness is to also understand my body.
Yeah.
And also finding joys.
It's a bodily experience because you do have attractions towards some people, not others. But until you actually engage in those sexual acts, you don't necessarily know what you enjoy doing or who you enjoy having sex with. Or
Right.
it's just it's a bodily experience that requires experience.
It requires work.
Yeah. Work.
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 I think that's exactly what the word means. Just
Yes.
like, you know,
Yeah.
that.
Snap. So we're going to start with a little speed round. Jeff, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about bodies or body positivity?
I immediately think of clothing industry.
Yeah.
Especially fast fashion. And how, you know, like when I started shopping online,
Yeah.
when I was entering my 20s, I noticed how, you know, plus sizes are always considered as an add-on.
Yeah, and in some stores too, they're always on a different side of the website, right?
Yeah, but like, I mean, I couldn't really speak to it because I'm not part of the community. But like, I when I think about it, I think about whether the decision to move something as a different site versus just, you know, incorporate to the site later on is like,
Yeah.
is that exclusion or is that inclusion? What actually are you conveying
Yeah.
to those kind of consumers, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's never a brand that is executing perfectly. Even for the recent brands such as Fenty, right?
Uh-huh.
I think they, like, again, I'm probably speaking out of my terms, but like I'm starting to question, like, is there kind of like some fetishization or kind of like, I don't know.
Of like plus size as like a new form of consumers.
Yeah, I mean, they have been consumers for the longest time, but the fact that history is telling that they're being considered as something secondary or something to add on, something as like an afterthought, right?
Yeah.
And how is that actually?
Meanwhile, you have other brands who are like prioritizing them, but in the end, it's just to sell a product, right?
Yeah.
So it's inclusion for the sake of selling.
Selling.
Yeah.
Are you buying or selling?
I'm both, baby.
I'm versatile.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you think about when you talk about bodies and positivity?
Ooh, When I think of bodies, I actually think of porn.
Yeah.
All kinds of porn. Mostly gay porn, because that's what I consume.
So, yeah.
That's what we consume.
Waybig.com. Don't Google that, please. Mom, do not Google that.
But I think of like porn and how the majority of the bodies depicted in porn are beautiful. They are made to be enjoyed from a distance, right?
Yeah.
To be consumed from a distance. And you think of the emergence of like OnlyFans and how that makes it possible for all kinds of bodies to engage in sex for profit. Because you have the difference between OnlyFans, which is, individuals making their own pornographic content, and then you have these large production companies that are also producing mainstream kinds of porn.
Right.
And there's a huge difference because you'll notice like the people who are making their own are all different sizes. They're all, practicing self-love and showcasing the true meaning of body positivity.
Right.
Whereas you have these production companies who just hire these muscular white gay men.
They might be straight.
And they might be straight, yes.
Hey.
So a lot of them do gay for pay, and they're not. And they have girlfriends and children and whatever. They live their straight lives on the side. But when I think of bodies and body positivity, I think of all the ways in which sex workers are celebrating their bodies on like these platforms that allow them to do that.
Right.
OnlyFans has its problems.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they really do. But I think it's also important to realize that there are people with different body types and that are actually engaging
And having sex.
and making that kind of content.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. I think porn is probably one of the earliest ways for people to know what a naked body looks like.
Yeah.
And that's heavily going to influence how a child...
Actually, it was not porn for me. It was your dad.
I want to talk about Drag Race moments, about the body. And I want to spell body with the A.
Okay.
Bawdy. I think bodies in Drag Race specifically, I'm not talking about in drag, but in Drag Race specifically has been used as a gimmick, as a plot point.
Yeah.
It's pretty tried. It's pretty, from the older days and the older seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking specifically about season 3, the comedy challenge, which is not comedy. If people who know are fans of the show, you know exactly what I'm gonna say.
Okay.
With
Hit it!
Alexis Mateo with the enhanced boobies.
Boobies. Big boobs.
Ciao. Anyway. And then Carmen Carrera with the fat suit.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
I wish I could hop on a time machine and go back and kind of
never
hear
see that again.
and kind of hear what are those conversations about, because like we were probably living in a different time then.
That was a decade ago.
And back then, the fatness and like body size
It's still the butt of the joke. I mean,
literally.
Yeah. And the way that like fatter queens are treated on that show.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Even skinny queens, they think that being skinny means
Equals success.
Or no personality. So in the same episode, like Michelle was like telling Carmen that stop relying on that body, which is interesting how like skinny people are being considered like.
Yeah, but the queens who make it to the end usually are skinny queens.
Oh, I never think about this.
Skinny privilege.
That's a real thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's just like pretty privilege.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a privilege to be skinny in our world. I mean, our beauty industry is synonymous with having skinty body. Right?
Yeah.
You look at supermodels, they're all so skinny. And that's what is fashionable and beautiful. Yeah. And it has been like that for a very long time.
Right.
And that's just like Western conceptions of beauty, though, because there are other cultures around the world who like actually celebrate fat people.
Yeah.
So, and fat bodies in general. Like
Right.
they are worshipped. I can't give an example right now because my brain is blank, but
Maybe we are just not educated in
I'm
those
not.
ways.
I understand how fat I am and how I should be celebrated.
Period.
And finally, when I think of bodies and body positivity, I think of exercise and gym culture
Oh yeah.
and how weird that is. I've just remember this one example of this bitch named Julian Michaels who basically said that fat people are unhealthy. And that's not necessarily the truth, right? I mean, you could be super skinny and smoke and do drugs and be a crackhead. You can be super skinny and still be like unhealthy.
Right.
Like that's just the reality of it.
right.
And you could have a perfect diet and still have, you know, some body weight, which is natural.
Right. What was the context that she said those things? Like, what time was this?
This would have been a few years back, but it was in relation to Lizzo, I believe. And she was like saying, stop celebrating this fat person because she's unhealthy. Meanwhile,
Wow.
Lizzo's just preaching body positivity, but also black body positivity, which is even more important, in my opinion,
Right.
because of the relationship between blackness and fat bodies, right? It's important to have that representation, and not in the most liberal way, but, you know,
Seeing.
seeing that.
Yeah.
But it was in relation to Lizzo, and she got shut down on Twitter. Yeah, it was in relation to Lizzo, but Julian Michaels got shut down and bullied on Twitter. Rightfully so. Fuck her. But this conversation just reminded me of like the ways in which gym culture kind of decides and dictates what is healthy and who is healthy, right? And it reminds me of all of these dating apps that we collectively use, and especially you and I as queer people, and all of the gym pics that we've encountered on Grindr and Tinder and all of these spaces, and how embarrassed I am for them. Ultimately. And then you have these same people with those pictures with their faces cropped out. In their description, it says discreet, down low, bisexual, daddy. And it's just so embarrassing.
It gets tiring for sure.
Yeah.
But like, if you're making this whole thing out of your personality and basing your life around gym,
Gym culture.
are we shaming gym people?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fuck. I mean, I want to go to the gym sometimes, but I don't want to go to.
You want to go to the gym so you can suck
Suck
someone
some-
off.
Yeah,
in the
anonymous
locker room.
cocks in the shower curtain.
Yeah.
I spend 5 minutes in the gym and then 45 minutes in the shower room. That's my gym culture. Okay.
But this reminds me, like, why don't we go to the gym?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I don't go because I'm too fucking lazy.
It's too far.
Also, I know a lot of people can probably identify with this, but when you are running and doing physical activity,
Yeah.
when you're breathing, do you ever taste that taste of like
Can you taste that shit in your mouth?
when you're doing physical activity, like real heavy physical activity, and when you breathe, can you taste the blood?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Can you taste the iron on your tongue?
No? Do you?
Yes.
When was the last time?
A long time ago.
Auntie.
No, when I do physical activity of any kind, and if it's too heavy, when I'm breathing and like gasping for air, I can taste the iron on my tongue. So it literally tastes like I'm breathing blood.
That's so scary.
Yeah. And that's just like a side effect. I don't know the scientific term or the medical term for this, but
Maybe you're feeling anemic and like all of the blood is rushing to your head and like it's over.
I am anemic though.
Probably.
I am. It's definitive, baby.
Oh, work.
Yes.
Wow.
I have to take B12 supplements and iron pills.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love a self-loving, healthy queen.
Yeah. And I always buy a new bottle before the old one is done.
Can I shove it up my ass?
There's an
anal
option
option
for that, yes.
I want to talk about why I don't go to the gym.
Yeah. Well,
I think that it's also part of the conversation about dysmorphia.
yeah.
Like, you are constantly surrounded. I assume you'll be surrounded by people who are
Gym rats.
Gym rats.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be perceived. I just don't want to be perceived.
You don't want to be that skinny bitch surrounded by macho, masculine, defined bodies, right? Yeah, me
I
neither.
think that's just the last place that I want to get my self-worth questioned or affirmed.
Yeah.
I would rather, do some jump jacks at home with my yoga mat and do some planks and,
Come on, planks.
just, get my breathing going. And that's good. I feel good about this. I know that I've worked. And also, like, as someone who is working physical labor all day,
Yeah.
there is just not a solid reason for me to go to the gym, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exercise is a class thing, I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
It's having access to a gym is part of it's a class.
It's a class issue, or
Having access to a gym means that you're part of a particular class,
right.
right?
There's so many jokes about if you see people running on the streets, that means your rent is going up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not a joke, honey. That's true.
happening in Hamilton.
But before we actually continue with our conversation, we want to take a little break.
Just a tiny little one. Mm-hmm. We'll be back. And we are back.
I fat.
Keep that. I'm keeping that.
No.
Welcome back to our segment called What's an Adjective?
What's an adjective?
Ooh.
This is, of course, our segment. We're going to hit the random adjective generator to prompt the first thing that comes to mind. We want to spill the beans and tell the juicy stories.
Yes.
Are you ready to spill some tea?
Yes, some tea.
Tea. Without further ado, do you want to hit us with the first adjective?
Yes,
Let's
and
go.
this is for myself. Dull.
Dull, that's for you.
Yeah, it's for me. I just want to say that this experience has been quite dull.
Okay.
I'm going home.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in this week on
Feeling My Oats.
Have you always been this bubbly or not dull?
No, I have always been this bubbly. I used to get called Mr. Sunshine in elementary school because I was always so happy.
In Ontario?
Yes. I was always so happy and bubbly and charming, and everyone loved me, and everyone still does. I mean, in many ways. I think I'm quite personable, right?
Well, we'll let our listener decide and comment.
Subscribe to my OnlyFans.
I think I'm the dull one here.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Like, how would you describe it?
You are actually very reserved in many ways.
You think so?
Yes.
I want to hear it.
You don't like to feel embarrassed. You don't like doing things if it's going to bring attention to yourself.
Why? I know how true this is, but it feels like a read.
I mean, take it for what you want.
It's true. It's true, though. It's
You are you're very reserved. You keep things to yourself. You don't like to ruffle any feathers. You
I'm a good citizen. Fuck it. I just think that I would rather slowly reveal myself.
you're like an onion.
I'm like an onion.
You're like an ogre. An ogre is just like an onion.
Ew. Can I regrow it in a pot?
And Shrek is right here. Fellas.
Hey.
Fellas,
I
you
just-
like some good juicy pussy.
Juicy yank yank. What the fuck is yank yank? I just want to say that I would rather slowly warm up to people, that allows me to, like, be more chill. No, I don't know. Chill is not the word. I just want to like slowly reveal, like a strip tease.
Yeah.
I'm not like a rough fuck.
Yeah.
No.
The amount of times that I embarrass myself and I just don't give a fuck. Like I'll say the most raunchiest shit, especially when we were in academia. I would say the most fucked up shit and people would just look at me and be like, now what the fuck is going on in
They
her
wouldn't
head?
say it. They would say, I don't know. I'm gonna disagree. I'm gonna agree to disagree.
No, I would say some of the most fucked up shit, like I would talk about absolutely anything. And I would bring this up just to rouse up a reaction.
You're gaslighting people.
Yeah, I was doing that intentionally. In many ways, I do not think I'm dull, but in other ways I am. It depends on my mood, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Some days I'm just like, I'd rather just stay home and fucking jerk off and go to bed.
Not like dull in that way, but like characterize your characteristics.
Yeah, no, not inherently dull. No,
Yeah.
not at all. And I think anyone who knows me would attest that that is not true. I'm not dull.
Dull person.
No.
You sound defensive.
I'm fucking angry.
I think dull people would never do a podcast like this.
That's true.
Period.
Except you. You're the exception.
Well, agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. Do you want to hit my adjective?
Yeah.
Let's go. Better be gay.
Grouchy.
Oh, yeah.
That's you.
That's me. I'm the grouchy cookie monster.
Mm-hmm.
Only gay.
Only gay.
Gay.
Cookie Monster's gay.
Gay. He's a
You want
faggot.
cookie.
He's a mommy-issued cookie monster.
Yeah, cookie is an euphemism for my whole.
For my ass. For my titties.
my titties. You want these cookies? Get these cookies.
Grouchy. What does grouchy even mean?
It means like someone who is irritable.
Fair?
Yeah,
That's
someone
fair.
who doesn't like being interrupted, who doesn't like too much commotion. And I think it's appropriate for you.
I am grouchy.
Yeah. I mean, I will call this bitch a few times a day and she doesn't answer. And the reason why I call back is because she doesn't answer.
No, I always answer. I always
don't
make
always
time for
answer.
you. Wow. I
No,
can't believe
you
you're putting my laundry out.
Yeah.
Thanks, by the way.
It needs the drive.
I just know that it stems from hyper awareness. Mm-hmm. It just like I'm very selfish with my time, which is something I do probably need to work on.
You are, and I know that, and I've called you out on that several times in the
We
past.
always make time for each other. You're the only person that I call, like, have regular phone calls with. I don't do that with anybody. Not that anybody wants to do that with me, but like we have been doing this for as long as I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
Thank you for being a friend.
Thank you for being a friend.
Sweet.
That's it.
That's it. That's the segment we call.
That's the segment.
What's an adjective?
What's an adjective? This is what's a super adjective?
Grouchy.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Fuck my drag then. We'll take a quick break before we talk more about Bawdy.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
And we're back, sissies. And now we are going to continue with our conversation on bodies and body positivity. And we want to dedicate the last half of the episode to explore other nuanced understandings of body positivity and bodies more generally, namely the ways the movement represents, or in many ways fails to represent, people of color, queer and trans people, and even fat people. The best way to approach this, however, is to actually discuss the relationship between our understanding of bodies and how they've been codified within structures of power and dominance. And I believe it's super important to actually have these conversations between ourselves and our listeners, right? Because whether we believe this or not, many of these structures influence and manipulate our lives as social, political, and cultural entities. And these structures have such negative and harmful consequences for all of us, and we should always hold space to decenter those myths, right?
Amen.
Amen.
Hello. It's obviously a big topic. It's a conversation that keeps evolving. It keeps
Definitely.
expanding. And I think our episode kind of like serves as a jumping pad and also as a starting point, or however you want to frame this, in your own journey into learning more about body positivity. We're just hoping to bring some of the insights and some of the key ideas out in this episode.
Definitely.
We came across this Refinery 29 article. It's called "What Does Body Positivity Really Means?" I think in the article there are some really interesting ideas that we want to try it out and talk about it further. The opening quote wrote something like, "These days, body positivity is mostly dismissed as a buzzword thrown around by brands, or when used by an influencer or in a magazine as something synonymous with self-love.
Yeah,
But body
definitely.
positivity has a past that is deeply entrenched in radical body acceptance and radical social justice."
Yeah.
So the article also kind of traces back to earlier, around 1960s, where it's about body liberation. It's about a social movement that is created by and for people in marginalized bodies, particularly, like you said, fat, black, queer, and disabled bodies.
Yeah, definitely.
But then kind of like you see how in years such as 2008, 2010, like social media, the uprising of Instagram, kind of picking up the steam of these body positivity movements. And you see a lot of Tumblr and Facebook groups kind of proliferating around
Yeah,
those
definitely.
times.
I think it was around that time. Would have been high school for me, where you've seen like a surge of like images that are promoting body positivity in general. But now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of these images were from brands,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
From brands, from movies, from all kinds of media.
Right.
And it was all promoting body positivity. But at the same time, you have to think to yourself, what is being sold to me? Because this
Right.
is ideally being sold.
There's an end goal to this, which
Yeah.
is to, again, to sell
Make
something.
profit.
Yeah, right. But then again, the article kind of interestingly points out that starting in around the years of 2012, influencers starts to jump into the picture of body positivity movements and starting to, migrate some of the content from Facebook to Instagram, which is interestingly the most visual
Representation.
and also social media that is right
Yeah.
now, right? That led to a lot of new hashtags such as body positivity, I love my body, etc., etc. Some of the quotes that in the article read something like, "Rather than promoting radical acceptance of marginalized bodies and elevating those rarely heard voices, these influencers were promoting general self-love and ultimately themselves."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ultimately, themselves. That's what's happening here.
Yeah,
Right.
because it becomes personalized in a way that it becomes a brand. It's like a sellable brand.
It is. It's
Yeah.
part of the branding of that individual influencer. I mean, there's a reason why they're called influencers, right?
It's
Which I still don't get it.
I
still
don't get it. I don't want to get influence on anything. But we're all doing things like this. Like we have a social or cultural influence by doing the podcast.
Yeah.
But in a way that, we have to be deliberate about stating our knowledges, where they're from, and also kind of,
Yeah.
creating conversations instead of just,
And
buy this,
Yeah, and making space for those conversations and making space for people to feel comfortable with themselves.
Right. Totally.
That is our role.
Right. So from influencer leads up to corporations are catching the trend of it. And brands are slowly venturing into the body positivity movement by whether marketing or targeting for the white plus size woman.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's how they were testing the waters and also had kind of their entry easier,
Yeah.
more marketable and, profitable way
Definitely.
of, making profit out of a movement.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think in this short analysis of the history behind the movement, I think we're seeing how the internet has become a big part of how the movement has changed throughout the years, and also how, whiteness also complicates our understanding of what body positivity means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely does. I mean, that's something that I want to touch on, actually. I want to begin with a set of questions. What's conventionally attractive? Who creates those standards? And what do those standards suggest about self-worth or just worth in general, right? And with those questions in mind, I think that whiteness has also become a commodity in itself. And we've talked about this in our past episode on property and how whiteness in itself is a form of property, right? It kind of is infused in this concept of what constitutes as property. So it's quite complicated in that sense, but whiteness in many ways is a commodity in itself. And we have to think about all the beauty brands that sell us certain kinds of aesthetics, or even the brands that co-opt black aesthetics and sell them with white models and bodies at the forefront, right? We see that happening a lot. And as the previous article already mentioned too, capitalism is also central to the emergence of liberal understandings of body positivity, and I say that in air quotes, thereby complicating our own relationship with our bodies, whether we realize this or not, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of us are always influenced and manipulated by the things that we see.
Right. We're consumer first and our own bodies later.
Yeah.
We're always consuming something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unescapable.
It's inescapable for sure.
Come on, English lessons.
Come on, English lessons.
Yeah.
But just to put things into perspective for you listeners out there, have you ever just wondered to yourself why you feel some kind of way about your body?
Mm-hmm.
Like for you, Jeff.
Right.
Right?
It's a huge question.
Yeah? Your feelings regarding your body are most likely influenced by the socioeconomic patterns and structures around you. Always.
Yeah.
Which is what we just kind of said.
Right.
So I'm just reiterating and that your perception of yourself is strongly influenced by larger structures of power, and that's the sad truth.
Right.
That's
it's like
works.
our bodies are surrounded by a magnetic field, and you have all these different like very sharp arrows that are trying to pierce through your fields, your aura, so to speak.
Yeah.
That kind of shapes who we are.
My chakra.
Chakra Khan. Yeah.
Yeah, but Jeff, we've kind of had this conversation before in relation to whiteness in our past episode, and even hookup culture and our own conversations, our own personal conversations here. And we've also talked about how whiteness can manifest within our experiences in online dating and creating relationships with one another, and how that informs harm for people within marginalized communities, right? So with body positivity in mind, how have you navigated this, and what are some ways you have learned to cope with issues like so?
Right. I think we need to talk about the concept of biases first.
Yeah.
Talk about biases in the present moment is to talk about history.
Yeah.
Because we have to understand who we are right now is a product of history. And to use myself an example, I grew up in the colonial way. Mm-hmm. And the way that I was taught and brought up to look at the world through the so-called the lens of whiteness, you have to talk about biases is to unlearn that.
Yeah, it's to unlearn those influences that have grasped your life up until this point.
Totally. Right? And to echo back to what you were saying earlier, it's to understand my present identity as a complex, layered, like multiple, socioeconomic factors that are shaping who I am right now.
Yeah, definitely.
But not to succumb your identity to that kind of exterior. But we have to understand if we have racial biases. For example, I might be only dating white people.
Yeah.
White men specifically, white cis men specifically. Like, what does it say about who I like and who I don't like?
Your preferences and how those preferences are influenced by the world that you live in.
Yeah, or have lived in. Yep, totally.
Yeah.
And I think to the bigger question and the challenge of acknowledging your biases is to be, so what am I going to do about it? So what am I going to do about it?
It's taking accountability.
Yeah, because you don't want to start diversifying who you date or, change who you suddenly be friends with suddenly in the name of, I'm going to...
Diversity.
Yeah, that's a dangerous conversation to have.
Well,
because
that's a privilege.
It's a privilege to say, oh, I'm going to start dating other races of people. That's exactly the wrong conversation, honey. Maybe you need to, start some of the work by yourself first. And then, maybe, question your desires and how you're...
That's exactly it. Question your desires.
Yeah.
Our desires are intimately shaped by what we desire as beautiful. And we've talked about this already.
Yeah.
Like, what is desirable is usually what is considered beautiful.
Right.
And I don't know why white people have been the pinnacle of beauty. And I say pinnacle in air quotes. Because, I mean, did you ever see a British person? Do they have nice teeth?
They don't have nice food for sure. Fuck their food.
I said
Anyway,
teeth.
I know. That's why their teeth are fucked.
Because they're eating haggis and shit.
Blood sausages. I want to bring up like body and race.
Yeah.
Because I come to understand how skin tone is not about skin, it's about class.
Yeah.
And I came across videos of like illegal bleaching and whitening cream in Philippines,
Shit.
which can be understood as like a colonial problem. It's like an aftermath of like girls are admiring and want to,
Aspire to whiteness.
yes, exactly. It's in a very real, and we don't need to analyze it. It's right there. Like people do want to be white.
Yeah.
That's just what's happening.
I mean, a lot of people of color, too, get plastic surgery to minimize some of their features, to change their appearance altogether.
Right.
So that they resemble white forms of aesthetics.
And in doing so, and sometimes they do it so knowingly that they know that they can, have some kind of socio-economical advantage because of how they're being perceived.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that has always been informing how I look at the world, because I'm hyper aware of how my body, and right now the version that I am is trying to unlearn some of that,
Yeah, and you're also
untangling.
equally like hyper aware of the ways you are being fetishized.
Oh, that
That's true,
hurts.
right?
That hurts, yeah.
Yeah, so you're like trying to discover your own body, but also trying to discover it in relation to how others perceive you. So you'll always be surrounded by the harmful effects of whiteness and white voyeurism.
Harmful effects.
Yeah. Effects.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's just like, it's so fucking sad.
Well, it's also liberating to know that, no, because you get to see how people operate, and and you can decide, I'm not going to engage this. I'm not going to engage in this bullshit
In
shenanigans.
this faggotry.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that. I mean, you take it in your own hands, right?
And jerk it.
So we want to conclude this episode on body positivity by asking a simple question. So Jeff, do you remember the first time you saw your body being represented?
I remember seeing myself being represented. Oh, okay. On Glee.
Ew.
Because, funny thing is, seeing all these local TV shows, a cast full of Hong Kong people, I never saw myself being represented. It is only through, like, North American pop
Media
culture that I... that's fucked up.
That's interesting.
There's this Asian guy that it's in Glee. His name is Harry.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I remember.
He's
I used
so
to watch the
fine.
show. I'm embarrassed.
I'm embarrassed to talk about it. But that was the first
First
example.
time?
Probably.
That was literally 2009, 2010. That wasn't even that long ago.
I know. Which is just, sad.
You live a sad, sad life, don't you?
I know. It would be so problematic if I say I saw myself being represented on That's So Raven. That
But-
is so fucked up.
I want to go back to the fact that you never felt represented through Hong Kong media.
No, that's the
Why?
fucked up thing about living in a colony. I think that speaks to a lot of kids who are growing up in other parts of the world and other types of media that are more quote unquote entertaining, and you aspire to be that entertaining,
Yeah.
and that kind of translate.
And you're still aspiring to be that
I
entertaining.
am. You know what?
Yeah.
Fuck you. Yeah, that was my.
That's really interesting because it's like Western media that made you reflect on the fact that you were represented.
Because that is being deemed as not cool, I guess.
I understand that mentality. I understand the mentality of like media not being cool.
Right.
And that kind of aspect, but I don't obviously understand the experience that you've been through. But it's that's really interesting though.
Yeah. I literally just connected the dots as I was saying it.
I can tell.
Yeah. I guess I'm still working on my things, my
Yeah.
traumas.
Oh fuck, we're all doing that.
And how are you gonna make that funny? Is that
Well,
question?
you just did.
Do you remember the first time seeing her being represented?
Girl, fat white people are represented anywhere and everywhere. Tracy Turnblad. You can't stop the beat. That's it.
That's it.
Hairspray. But she made it on television, mama.
What's her name? Christina Bransky? No, that's someone else. Never mind. White woman confused me. I want to really bring up some caveats before we conclude today's episode. Because the conversation has always been about, representation matters. Representation. But does it really matter? Like, in some ways, it also ties back to how representation ultimately, the goal is to sell us something.
Oh, yeah.
And
Definitely.
how, as consumers, how do we establish a healthier distance between what we consume versus what we think is the ideal world that we want to live in?
Yeah.
And, like, how are we... I think audience has a more active participation in what we decide to watch. Mm-hmm. And what
No, we ultimately just need to like envision and imagine something outside those structures.
Yeah, totally.
And outside those structures of consumerism, because honestly, if we continue to work within those structures, then we're not going to get out of it.
I think I totally agree with what you're saying about working outside the structure.
Yeah.
And also, while we're within it, I think some of our listeners and also ourselves are always going to be within it.
Yeah.
And trying to think more critically about, topics such as body positivity. There's even conversations about, should we always be so positive? Like, if people are going to go for something called body neutrality, which is just, a more inner, private conversation with your body and listening to what your body and doing what feels good to you.
Yeah.
In a really, more directed and more intentional ways.
And sometimes your body is not always speaking to you in ways that requires immediate action.
Yes.
Like, for example, like when your stomach is growling, it's saying, I'm hungry, feed me, bitch. But sometimes your body is telling you things without those affective responses, right?
Right.
So you just have to be like very careful with how you are listening to your body.
I'm going to think about that.
Yeah.
Thank
Sometimes
you.
your body is communicating to you in ways that do not elicit some kind of immediate reaction.
Interesting.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's why some people too have like diseases or even cancer and they just don't know because they don't feel pain. They don't feel any kind of affective response from their body.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are listening intently, you can actually
Right.
find those ruptures.
I think this wraps up our conversation about body positivity. I know how, despite the length of the discussion, I think we just wanted to, again, try out some of the key ideas and wanted to join in the conversation and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
When I mean balls, I mean your balls.
Bitch.
Roll them. Roll them up and down my back, my lower back.
Boom.
Boom! And so that concludes our episode. Now, before we leave, we want to remind you to join us on Instagram at Feeling My Oats Pod, on Twitter at Feeling My Oats PD, and on our YouTube channel. And just a reminder, you can send us a message on feelingmyoatspod@gmail.com. So make sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast from. And while you're there, support a bitch by leaving a 5-star review.
Hi.
Hi. And while you're there, support a bitch by leaving a 5-star rating. And I just want to remind you all that I do have a Twitch stream. You can follow us at Feeling My Oats TTV, and I stream on Thursdays from 6 to 8, and on Sundays from noon to 3.
I want to see some juicy yank. Please.
Yes.
You can also find me on Instagram at @JeffDunaway_ and Substack at pleaseremindme.substack.com, where you get your weekly newsletter personal essay for free.
Yay.
Make sure you subscribe and have a new piece of writing, please. In the meantime, thank you for listening to our faggy voices and opinions, and we hope you feel your oats
Today.
Bye.
Bye, sluts.